December of 1884. I set a table for ghosts. Not intentionally. Mind you, habit does that to a woman. 3 years a widow. And my hands still reached for 2 cups when the coffee boiled. Still roasted a chicken too large for one person to finish in a week. The morning started before dawn, the way Christmas always did in my house. My house? I still couldn't think of it that way, without the possessive catching in my throat. Our house? His house? The house I lived in alone. I moved through the kitchen in darkness, hands finding what they needed without light. Flour. Salt. Lard. The ingredients of abundance. My fingers worked the dough while the stove heated, kneading with a rhythm I'd learned from my mother, perfected through a marriage, and now performed for no one at all. When did I start talking to myself? When did I start answering? The goose had been roasting since before sunrise. I'd stuffed it with apples and onions, basted it every half hour. Too much food for one person. I knew this. Did it anyway. If loss was going to make me smaller, I'd refuse it in the only way I knew how. With abundance, cinnamon and nutmeg filled the air as I rolled out pie crusts. 3 pies. Apple, mincemeat, pumpkin. My husband used to say I made the best pies in the territory. Used to. Past tense. Everything about my life had become past tense. The worst part of widowhood isn't grief. It's purpose leaking away like water through cupped hands. What do you do with all that love you stored up by afternoon? The house smelled like every Christmas of my childhood. Roasted meat and fresh bread, sweet spices and wood smoke from the stove. The warmth pressed against the windows where frost made lace patterns on the glass. Outside, the world was white and cold and silent. Inside, my kitchen blazed with heat and color and the evidence of care no one would witness. I set the table as the winter sun slanted low. My good china, kept wrapped in cloth all year, silver polished until it gleamed. 2 candlesticks, tall white candles that would burn slowly through the evening. I lit them as the room darkened, watching the flames catch and hold, one place setting. I used to set 2. Then I couldn't bear it. Now I couldn't remember why I'd ever needed 2. The chair across from me sat empty, pushed in tight against the table. I'd kept his coat on the hook by the door for 3 years. Some mornings I still expected to see him reaching for it. Some mornings I forgot he was gone, just for a breath. Just long enough for the remembering to hurt fresh. I sat down to my feast alone. The goose steamed on its platter, skin crisp and golden. Potatoes whipped smooth with butter and cream, green beans I'd put up last summer. Bread still warm from the oven. Everything perfect. Everything wasted. The silence wasn't peaceful. It roared. I picked up my fork, set it down, picked it up again. This was what surviving looked like. I just hadn't expected it to feel so much like drowning. The knock came sharp against the quiet. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. No one visited on Christmas. No one visited at all, unless you counted the occasional trip to town for supplies. My nearest neighbor lived 2 miles away. I stood, uncertain. Wiped my hands on my apron, though they weren't dirty. Walked to the door with my heart doing something strange in my chest. I hadn't heard that sound. Someone needing me in longer than I cared to count. 7 children stood on my porch. 7. Oldest to youngest, like stair steps, each one holding the hand of the next smaller. The oldest girl might have been 12, dark hair escaping from braids. The youngest boy couldn't have been more than 4. Thumb in his mouth. Eyes enormous in a thin face. They were clean but patched. Darned stockings, coats that had been let down at the hems, and cold. Lord, They were cold, shivering in the wind that cut across the prairie. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am." The oldest girl's voice trembled. Not from cold, from shame. "But Papa's sick. And we haven't. We thought maybe—" She couldn't finish. I watched her try, watched her throat work, watched tears. She was too proud to shed well up and stay trapped. I knew that hunger, not for food. For everything, food meant safety, care, someone thinking you were worth feeding. "Come in." I had them inside before I'd finished the thought. Before I could second-guess or calculate or protect myself, just opened the door wider and said, "Quickly now, before all the warm air escapes." They filed in, careful not to track mud. 7 pairs of eyes went to my table, to the feast laid out and steaming. The smallest boy made a sound, not quite a whimper. More like the noise a starving animal makes when it smells food after too long without— "Sit." I was already pulling out chairs, setting more plates. My hands knew what to do, even if my mind was still catching up. "Sit down, all of you. We can't—" The oldest girl started. "You can—" I looked at her straight. "You knocked on my door on Christmas. I've got more food here than I can eat in a week. Now sit." They sat. Slowly. Like they might break the chairs. Like they might break themselves if they hoped too hard. I served them, heaped their plates with goose and potatoes, beans and bread. Watched them look at the food, then at each other, then back at the food, like they couldn't quite believe it was real. "Go on," I said, my voice gentler than I'd heard it in years. "Eat." The oldest girl picked up her fork first. Then the others followed. Tentative at first, tiny bites, proper manners, then faster. Then, with the abandon of children who'd been hungry too long, I'd thought I was preparing this meal out of habit. Turns out, I'd been preparing it for exactly this. The middle girl, maybe 8 years old, had tears running down her face while she ate. Not sad tears. Relief tears. The kind that come when safety arrives and you can finally stop being brave. "What are your names?" I asked, filling their cups with milk. "I'm Sarah." The oldest said, "This is Martha, Ruth, Samuel, Rebecca, Isaac, and Lucy. Biblical names. Good frontier names. 7 chances to be needed again. I'm Mrs. I stopped. Started over. I'm Mary, just Mary." "Thank you. Miss Mary?" Sarah's voice was thick. "We haven't celebrated Christmas since Mama." She couldn't finish that either. Didn't need to. The youngest girl, Lucy, laughed at something Samuel said. Just a small sound. Quickly covered with her hand like she'd forgotten she was allowed. But that sound, God help me, that sound, I hadn't known how desperately I'd been starving for it. The afternoon slipped into evening while they ate. They tried everything, exclaimed over the pies, went back for seconds. Color came into their faces. The tension in Sarah's shoulders eased. Lucy fell asleep with her head on the table. Sticky-faced and full. My house had been so quiet for so long. Now it remembered what it was built for. Another knock came. Heavier this time, adult. I saw fear flash across Sarah's face before I could get to the door. A man stood on my porch, late 30s, worn down the way prairie wind wears down everything it touches. Thin, but with the kind of thinness that comes from working too hard and eating too little. His eyes found the children through the open door, then came back to me. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." His voice was rough, like he'd been coughing. They shouldn't have. I told them not to bother folks. They did exactly right. I kept my voice firm. They were hungry. It's Christmas. I had food. We'll manage. Pride stiffened his spine, even as fever sweat shone on his forehead. We always do. I heard the lie in it. The way manage meant barely survive. The way his pride was eating him alive while his children went hungry. I knew that pride. It was cousin to my loneliness. Your children are fed and warm, I said. That's not something to apologize for. He swayed slightly, caught himself. I should get them home. Don't make us go. Papa. Lucy had woken up, her small voice piercing. It's warm here. I looked at the children. They were looking at their father the way children do when they're calculating something beyond their years, weighing his need to protect his pride against their need for what I was offering. The oldest girl, Sarah, had my sister's eyes. Or maybe I just wanted her to. Wanted to believe kindness could circle back like seasons. It was no imposition, sir. I made myself say it. Made myself be honest in a way I hadn't been honest in 3 years. It was a gift. To me, his eyes met mine. Really met them. And I saw it, the recognition. 2 people who'd both lost spouses. Both trying to survive more than live. Both failing at it. You're alone. Not a question. 3 years now. 2 for us. He rubbed his face with one rough hand. Sarah does her best, but she's just a child herself. I know what they need. Why was I pushing this? What was I risking? I have more meals in me than I have people to feed. If you'd let me, if you'd accept, I couldn't finish. Afraid I'd pushed too far. Afraid of what it meant that I wanted this so badly. He studied me for a long moment. I could see him weighing it. Pride against practicality, independence against need. That'd be kind of you. Miss Mary, just Mary, Thomas. He offered his hand. I took it. His palm was calloused, his grip careful. Thomas Fletcher, Mr. Fletcher. I released his hand, felt the absence of it. Would you consider letting me help with the children? I could come by weekly. Cook, mend, whatever's needed. Why was I afraid? What was the worst that could happen? I'd been living the worst. Already. Unused love. Rotting inside me like old fruit. I'd be grateful, he said finally. More grateful than I can say. The children gathered their coats. Lucy clung to my skirt until Sarah gently pulled her away. Can we come back? Miss Mary, I'll come to you, I said. I promise. They filed out into the cold night, each one touching my hand as they passed. Thomas was last, carrying Lucy. He paused at the door. This means something, he said quietly. I want you to know that. I know. After they left. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and evidence of life. The silence was different now, not a period. A question mark. And I'd never been good at leaving questions unanswered. Christmas night. I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house in darkness, touching things. The table where they'd sat. The chair where Lucy had fallen asleep. The forgotten hair ribbon on the floor. Pink. Frayed at the edges. I picked it up. Held it like proof. The next morning, I cleaned. Put away the extra dishes. Folded the borrowed chairs back against the wall. Tried to make my house look like it had before. But something had shifted. Like furniture moved slightly out of place. Everything looked the same, but felt different. I caught myself humming. When had I stopped humming? When had I decided joy was disrespectful to grief? The second day after. Christmas. I cooked. Not elaborate, just a pot of stew. More than I needed. Set the table for one. Removed the extra plates I'd automatically put out. Sat down to eat, and couldn't taste anything. The house was too quiet. It had always been too quiet, but now I knew the difference. Before, I'd called it peace. Now I recognized it as the sound of something missing. I'd thought I was content before. Turns out I'd just forgotten what the word meant. By the third day, I stopped pretending, rose before dawn and started baking bread, biscuits, 2 pies, packed them in a basket along with butter I'd churned, dried apples, a jar of preserves. My hands shook slightly as I worked. I told myself it was charity. That's what charity looks like, hands that tremble when you give. Who was I fooling? The walk to their house took an hour through snow. The cold bit at my face, but I barely felt it. My heart hammered against my ribs. Each step felt like confession. I need you. I need you. I need you. What was I doing? Building toward loss again? Or refusing to let fear make me a ghost in my own life? Their house appeared through the trees, small, weathered, smoke rising from the chimney. I could hear them before I saw them. Children's voices, sharp and clear in the winter air. An argument about chores. Normal, alive. I knocked, and the door burst open. 7 faces. Lighting up. Lucy shrieked and grabbed my skirt. Sarah's careful smile. Thomas behind them. Surprise and something else in his eyes. Miss Mary. Lucy's voice was pure joy. You came back. I told Samuel you would. I told him you promised. I did promise. I stepped inside, and the warmth hit me. Not just the heat from the stove. Something else. Something I'd forgotten existed. The door opened, and I let myself in. Their house was what you'd expect, a man and 7 children managing alone. Which is to say, barely managing at all. Dishes piled in the basin. Mending in a basket that had clearly been ignored for months. Floors that needed sweeping. Nothing dirty. Exactly. Just the chaos that comes from too many needs and not enough hands. I knew what it looked like when someone was drowning on dry land. You don't have to, Thomas started. I know. I set down my basket, rolled up my sleeves. I want to. The children scattered to their chores while I assessed the situation. Sarah tried to help, but I sent her to mind the younger ones. This wasn't about making them feel guilty. It was about doing what my hands remembered how to do. Purpose, usefulness, worth. I started with the mending, sat by the window with needle and thread, patching torn knees and loose buttons. My fingers knew the rhythm. This small ritual I'd performed countless times in my own house, now done for someone else. Martha and Ruth watched me sew, shy at first, then asking questions. I showed them how to make the stitches small and even, how to knot the thread so it wouldn't pull loose. Small things. The kind of things a mother teaches. Mama used to hum when she sewed, Ruth said quietly. Do you know any songs? I did. Hadn't sung them in 3 years. But they came back, like old friends. We hummed together while we worked, and something tight in my chest loosened. By midday, I had stew simmering and bread rising. Thomas came in from checking the animals, stamping snow from his boots. He stopped when he saw what I'd done. The tidied kitchen, the mended clothes folded neatly. The children gathered around the table, learning from me. You're good with them, he said. I didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know how to say I'd forgotten I could be good at anything except being alone. They're easy to be good with, I said instead. He showed me what he'd fixed while I worked. A window frame that had been letting in cold. Part of the roof he'd patched before the storm hit. A broken chair made whole again. You're handy. I ran my fingers along his repair work. Solid. Careful. Done right. Had to learn. He shrugged. Things break. Someone has to fix them. His house smelled different than mine. Wood smoke and children. And life. Mine smelled like the careful preservation of nothing. The afternoon passed in comfortable work. Me in the kitchen, him outside, the children moving between us like bridges. Lucy appointed herself my helper, though mostly she just talked. About her mother, about missing her, about how Papa tried but didn't know how to braid hair proper. "Could you teach me?" she asked. "To braid." I could. I touched her wild curls. "Come here." I braided her hair while she sat between my knees, chattering about everything and nothing. The weight of her small body against my legs. The trust of it. The simple gift of being allowed to care. Evening came too fast. I should leave. Give them space. But Thomas was teaching Samuel to whittle by the fire, and Martha was showing me her drawings. And Ruth had fallen asleep on the bench with her head in Sarah's lap. "Stay for supper," Thomas said. Not asking, offering. We ate together. The stew I'd made, stretched to feed 8, bread warm from the oven. The children talking over each other, telling stories, laughing. Thomas at one end of the table, me at the other. Like we'd done this before. Like we could do it again. Our hands reached for the same pot at once. Touched. Both of us paused. His eyes met mine across the table, and something passed between us. Not words. Understanding. Maybe. Recognition. I'd forgotten this the moment before, when possibility hangs in the air like pipe smoke. "Could this be regular?" Thomas asked as I gathered my things to leave. "You coming here? I know it's asking a lot." "It's not." I met his eyes, straight. "It's not asking too much at all." Walking home in the dark. My basket empty. I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. The pull of gravity. Something tethering me to earth, to purpose, to people who needed me, to him. My husband had been different, quieter, gentler, content with small things. Thomas was all frontier practicality, weathered by loss but not broken by it. I'd thought I could only love one kind of man. Turns out the heart is more flexible than grief gives it credit for. February brought the kind of storm that reminds you the frontier doesn't care about your plans. Or your survival. I was at their house for my weekly visit when the sky turned that particular gray. Not snow cloud gray. Something meaner. Thomas saw it too. Stopped mid-sentence and looked out the window with his jaw tight. "You should head home," he said, "before it hits." I looked at the sky. At the children. At the distance between their house and mine. "I'll stay." The words came out before I'd thought them through. Just to be safe. The storm hit an hour later. Wind that screamed. Snow that didn't fall so much as a tack horizontally. The temperature dropped so fast I could feel it through the walls. Thomas brought in as much firewood as we could fit. I inventoried their food supplies, calculating silently. The children felt the tension. Grew quiet. Lucy climbed into my lap without asking, and I held her tight. "It'll be all right." I told her, told myself. "We'll be all right." The first night. We barely slept. The wind was too loud, the cold too aggressive at the edges of the room. Thomas and I took turns keeping the fire going, passing each other in the darkness. His hand on my shoulder as he traded places, my hand on his arm, steadying him. By morning, the storm hadn't broken. Snow had piled against the windows, turning the house into a cave. The children were frightened now, even Sarah trying to hide her worry. "Tell us a story, Miss Mary," Lucy said, "like Mama used to." So I did. Made up tales of brave girls and clever boys. of winters that ended and springs that came. Anything to keep their minds off the wind. Thomas listened while he rationed our firewood. Our food? I could see him calculating, just like I was. How long could we stretch what we had? The second night was harder. We ran out of stories. The children cried from cold and fear and cabin fever. Rebecca had a cough that worried me. Samuel fought with Isaac over nothing. Thomas and I worked in tandem, him calming the boys, me rocking Lucy and Rebecca, Sarah helping where she could, trying to be adult when she was still so young. We were all exhausted, all stretched thin. Late that night, the children finally asleep. Thomas and I sat by the dying fire, neither of us speaking, both too tired for words. "I'm glad you're here," he said finally. "I don't know how I'd with all of them." "You'd manage," I said. "You always do. Managing isn't living." His voice was rough. I wasn't living, just performing living for the children's sake. I understood that. The difference between surviving and being alive, the way you could go through all the motions and still be drowning inside. "After my husband died," I said, "I thought I was fine. Kept the house, cooked meals, went to town when I needed supplies. Fine." The word tasted bitter. Turns out fine and dying feel the same if you're numb enough. He turned to look at me. The firelight caught his face, showed the lines grief had carved there. What changed? 7 hungry children showed up at my door. He smiled at that, tired, but real. "Lucky for me, you answered. Lucky for me, you let them knock." His arm came around my shoulders, not asking, just there, warm and solid and steady. I should have pulled away. Should have maintained distance. Instead, I let my head rest against his shoulder. "This means something," he said, same words as before, but heavier now, weighted with context. "I know." We sat like that while the storm raged outside, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder, the children asleep around us. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I'd forgotten the shape of. Safe. The third day, the wind stopped, just like that. One moment, howling. The next, silent. We dug ourselves out, squinting in the sudden brightness. The world was white everywhere, sculpted by wind into shapes that didn't look real. Thomas walked me home through waist-deep snow. We didn't talk much, both too tired. But when we reached my door, he stopped. "I don't know what this is," he said, "between us, but I want you to know I'm grateful for it." I looked at him. His face wind-burned and exhausted. His eyes honest. So am I. After he left, I stood in my kitchen. The silence was back. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had echoes. Voices and laughter and the memory of being needed. We weren't 2 separate families helping each other anymore. We were something new, trying to be born. March brought mud and doubt in equal measure. The doubt was all mine. Thomas was courting me. Not obviously he was too careful for that, but the signs were there. Small gifts. A carved spoon. Wildflowers that shouldn't have survived the winter. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. The way I looked back when I thought he wasn't. I could feel myself falling toward something I might not survive losing. My husband's death hadn't been dramatic. Just pneumonia and 3 weeks, and then silence. But the silence after that was the thing that almost killed me. Not the dying. The after. That's what I was afraid of. Doing this again. Needing someone again. Building a life that could be ripped away. I started making excuses. Couldn't visit one week, claimed I was ill. Couldn't visit the next, said I had work to do. Thomas sent notes I didn't answer. The children sent drawings I couldn't look at. When had I started counting his footsteps? When had his silence become familiar? When had I begun to miss? When he was gone, I was protecting myself. That's what I told the mirror. The mirror called me a coward. Days passed, then weeks. I stopped counting them, but I felt each one like a stone in my pocket. Heavy. Getting heavier. Week 3. A knock came at my door. I'd stopped hoping it would be them. So when I opened it and saw Lucy standing there, Wildflower clutched in one small fist, I couldn't speak. Papa says we mustn't bother you, she said, her voice careful. But I brought this. Are you sick? Miss Mary, I wanted to make sure you're all right. The child's simple trust broke something open in my chest. The wall I'd been building, the protection I'd wrapped around myself. It cracked straight through. Come in, sweetheart. I pulled her inside, knelt down to her level. I'm not sick. I was just afraid, cowardly, running from the best thing that had happened to me in years. I was just being foolish. She handed me the wildflower, wilted now, but she'd carried it all the way here. The youngest said you weren't coming back. I told him he was wrong. You promised. You don't break promises. I'd been so afraid of loss. I'd forgotten to be afraid of waste, of wasting love, of teaching children that people leave. You're right, I said. I promised. Let me get my coat. I walked Lucy home through the mud. Spring mud. The kind that sucks at your boots and makes every step work. But I barely noticed. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I'd run from this. Now I was choosing to run toward it. Thomas was at the door before we reached it, relief and hurt warring in his face. The children spilled out around him, reaching for me, all of them talking at once. I'm sorry, I said, looking at Thomas over their heads. I was afraid. I'm afraid too, he said quietly. Every day, we stood there, two people who'd both lost everything once, deciding if we were brave enough to risk it again. That evening, the children in bed. We sat by the fire, not touching, just close. Would you consider marrying me? Mary. His voice was steady, but I could hear the fear underneath. I know it's fast. I know we've both been hurt. But I wake up every morning and you're the first thing I think about. The children love you. I love you. My heart was in my throat. All my fears right there on the surface. He could die. The children could die. I could lose everything again. I'm terrified, I said. Me too. We both smiled at that. Fear was honest. Fear was real. Fear meant this mattered. Ask me tomorrow, I said. Let me think on it. He nodded, reached for my hand, held it between both of his. I'll be here. I walked home in the dark, my mind spinning, my heart pulling me back the way I'd come. When had I started setting 8 plates without thinking? When had his coffee cup next to mine on the hearth? Started feeling right. I'd kept my husband's coat on the hook for 3 years. Some mornings, I still expected to see him reaching for it. But I'd stopped setting his place at the table months ago. When had I started setting Thomas's instead? April morning, I woke to spring. The world green again, mud drying, everything beginning. My house quiet, but not empty feeling. I'd carried his question for 3 days, let it settle. Let myself feel the terror and the wanting in equal measure. Which fear was greater? Losing them or never having them at all, I dressed carefully. braided my hair, looked at myself in the mirror. Not young anymore. Not untouched by grief, but alive. Choosing to be alive. The walk to their house felt different this time. Not confession, decision. He was mending fence when I arrived. Looked up, saw my face, set down his tools. "Yes," I said, "I'll marry you, but I need you to understand something. I'm afraid. I'm going to be afraid every day. Fear of losing you, losing them, losing this. I'm saying yes anyway." His smile started slow, then spread. "I wake up afraid every morning that my children will forget their mother, that I'm failing them, that I'll mess this up with you. I'm asking you to marry me anyway. Neither of us pretending it would be easy. Neither promising forever because we both knew forever was a lie. We can promise today," I said. "And tomorrow. And the day after. That's all any of us get, one day at a time." He kissed me then, gentle, careful, like I was something precious he might break. I kissed him back, and it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. The children poured out of the house like water. Lucy got to me first, wrapping herself around my legs. The others circled us, all talking at once. "Are you staying?" Sarah asked, hope and fear in her voice. Thomas gathered them close. "Miss Mary and I are getting married. That means she'll be here all the time. Is that all right with you?" Silence for a heartbeat, then chaos. Happy chaos. Lucy climbing into my arms, Samuel hugging my waist, Martha and Ruth holding my hands like I might disappear if they let go. "Will you be our mama now?" Lucy asked against my shoulder. I chose my words carefully. Honest. "I'll be your Miss Mary. That's its own kind of family. Your mama. She'll always be your mama. But I can be someone who loves you too. If you'll let me." Sarah's eyes filled. She'd want that. Mama would want us to be happy. We spent the afternoon planning simple wedding. Wildflowers and 7 witnesses under age 12. Thomas and I made lists, practical things like combining households, who sleeps where, what furniture to keep, the mundane details of building a life. "What about your house?" he asked. "Sell it. Use the money for the children. They'll need clothes, supplies. I don't need it anymore." The morning smelled like wet earth and new growth. Everything beginning again. Including me. We were married in May on a Tuesday. The preacher came to the house. Thomas wore his good shirt, and I wore blue practical. Could be worn again. The children stood around us, clean and combed, trying to be still. "Do you, Mary, take this man?" I did. With all my fear and all my hope, yes. "Do you, Thomas, take this woman?" He did, his voice steady and sure. The preacher pronounced us married, and the children cheered. Lucy threw wildflowers she'd picked that morning. They caught in my hair, in Thomas's, scattered across the floor. I'd been married before with white dress and church bells. This was better. This was honest. Moving my things to their house, our house took a week. The children helped, arguing cheerfully about where everything should go. Thomas carried my heavy furniture, setting it down where I pointed, teasing me about how much I'd accumulated. 3 years alone, and you've got enough dishes for 20 people. You never know when 20 people might show up hungry." He laughed at that, kissed my temple. Oh, fair point. We weren't a fairy tale. We were real messy and loud and imperfect. Arguments about whose turn it was for chores. Children testing boundaries with their new mother, who wasn't quite mother. Thomas and I learning each other's rhythms, his morning quiet, my need for order. Building a family from scratch isn't like flipping a switch. It's like learning to dance with a new partner. You step on toes, apologize, try again, but the small joys accumulated like interest. Breakfast table chaos. Everyone talking at once. Thomas's hand on my shoulder as he passed. Children running to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix them. The weight of Lucy in my lap at bedtime, her head heavy against my chest. This was what I'd thought I lost forever, the dailiness of love. Turns out you can find it twice if you're brave enough. Late summer evening, the dishes done. Children finally in bed. Thomas and I sat on the porch, watching stars come out, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder. The comfortable silence of people who didn't need words. "Are you happy?" he asked. I thought about it, really thought, yes, scared sometimes, but yes, me too. He kissed the top of my head. Thank you for taking a chance on us. Thank you for giving me a reason to... People say courage is fearless. They're wrong. Courage is being terrified and doing it anyway. Courage is saying yes when your whole body screams, run. Courage is planting gardens in ground that might freeze, loving people who will die, living anyway. This wasn't the life I'd planned. It was better. It was chosen, and that made all the difference. First Christmas as a family. I woke before dawn the way I always did, but this time, Thomas was beside me. 7 children asleep in rooms that used to echo empty. I slipped out of bed, lit candles in the kitchen, started preparations for the feast. But this time, I wasn't alone. Sarah appeared first, yawning, then Martha. Soon, all of us were working together, kneading dough, basting the goose, peeling potatoes. "Remember when you first came?" Lucy asked, sitting on the counter where she definitely shouldn't be. We were so hungry. I remember. I touched her wild curls. I was hungry too. For food. For this? I gestured at the chaos around us. Flour on every surface. Children arguing cheerfully. Life everywhere. For you. Thomas came in from morning chores, stamping snow from his boots. Stopped in the doorway, taking it all in. His eyes met mine across the room, and I saw what I felt, reflected back. Gratitude, wonder, the daily miracle of choosing each other. We sat down to eat 8-place settings, every chair filled. Thomas at one end, me at the other, children between us, passing dishes, telling stories, laughing. I'd thought that first Christmas I was being generous, sharing my feast. Turned out I'd been starving, and they fed me. The mathematics of it still amazed me. 2 incomplete families equaling 1 whole one. Not because we filled each other's lacks, but because we chose each other's presence. Because we transformed fear into fuel. Because we understood that abundance stored up and never shared becomes its own kind of poverty. Months became seasons. Seasons became rhythms. We became us. Spring meant planting together. Thomas showing the boys how to work the land. Me teaching the girls to tend the garden. All of us muddy and tired and satisfied. Summer meant preserving the harvest. Jars lined up in neat rows, evidence of plenty. The children helping, learning, growing. Fall meant preparing for winter. But this time, winter didn't scare me. We'd face it together. I kept 1 candle from that first Christmas, lit it each year on the anniversary, remembering the knock that changed everything. 7 hungry children, and a door I almost didn't open. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked, catching me with the candle. "How lucky I am." I set it down carefully. How close I came to missing all of this. He pulled me close. But you didn't. But I didn't. People said I saved those children. The truth was simpler and stranger. We saved each other. That's what family does. Not rescue, but choosing to survive together. Choosing to risk loss for the gift of presence. Choosing today and tomorrow and the day after. Evening now, dishes done, children in bed, Thomas and I at our table with coffee and quiet. His hand covering mine on the worn wood. "No regrets?" he asked. I thought about the woman I'd been, setting a table for ghosts, calling loneliness peace, surviving but not living. Then I thought about who I'd become, mother to 7, wife to a good man, part of something larger than grief. "None," I said. "Not one." The house that had been too big was exactly right now. The silence I'd called peace had been grief pretending. This chaos, this noise, this risk, this was life. And I'd almost missed it out of fear. Thank God for 7 hungry children. Thank God for a man brave enough to let them knock. Thank God for the courage it takes to say yes. The candles burned low. Stars came out. Somewhere, children dreamed of tomorrow. And I sat in the middle of my loud, messy, perfect life and felt my heart overflow with the simple truth I'd spent so long running from. Love doesn't ask permission. It just knocks. All you have to do is answer the door.